All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having an incredible week. Just a quick show for you guys today. I want to hit one of the big games from last night, a showdown between two of our top two-tier contenders, a Denver Nuggets team that I have in the top tier and a Detroit Pistons team that I have in the second tier. They handle the Nuggets pretty much from start to finish, never trail in the game. I want to dig into that one. Then at the tail of this show, right after we finished our episode last night, the Darius Garland for James Harden swap was consummated. So I want to dive into that one more detailed than we did yesterday. Very briefly touch on some of the things we talked about yesterday, but I want to focus on some of the numbers and give you guys a good breakdown of what those players have been this season. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Make sure you like this video. That helps us a lot. And last but not least, if you want to get mailbag questions into our mailbag, drop them into the comments and we'll get to them in our weekly mailbags throughout the rest of the season. All right, let's talk some basketball. So Nuggets Pistons was a really fun game. Detroit never trailed and led by as many as 20, but if Tobias Harris doesn't get a crazy roll on a missed corner three, like missed it short and left, and like somehow just popped over the front of the rim and went in, if that doesn't happen, then Denver has a chance to tie or take the lead with just under 2 minutes left. And so it was kind of a classic demonstration for both teams as to why they are championship contenders, just at different points in the game. Detroit being physically dominant throughout the game, and then kind of one of those classic Denver Nuggets, like, oh, you have us down 14 with 5.5 minutes left, but we're just going to suddenly start chaining together stops and scoring every single time down the floor. Denver kind of reminds me of those Golden State teams with Steph Curry in his prime, where like a 10-point lead in the middle of the fourth quarter just doesn't feel safe because you just know they can get super hot on offense and chain together stops. And so you got to see kind of the ceiling for both of these groups. The first half was a complete Detroit domination. Started with Cade getting consistent paint touches, beating his man. Like he was giving Christian Brown fits with really quick moves, just like moving quickly off the catching the post off the left block, quick spin over his right shoulder, just goes right by him, drops it off for Asar Thompson for a dunk. Catch at the top, just simple little jab step to the left. Christian just buckles off the screen. Cade goes down the lane and gets an and one. He toasted Jamal Murray on a simple driving move off of the right wing. I really like that little, because the main thing we're going to get into is just how Detroit dominates in the paint, right? Like they are the second best points in the paint team in the league. I think they had 34 points in the first half, 34 points in the paint just in the first half. That's an incredible number right there. And a big part of that is just consistent deep paint touches, and comes from a variety of different things that we'll talk about in a minute. But one of the big ways that they do that, especially in the half court, is Cade Cunningham and just his ability to break the point of attack either through ISOs, post-ups, and ball screens and consistently get deep paint touches. And so little things like trying to manufacture opportunities to get downhill penetration, I think, is key. And there's this little X action that they'll run where they'll have like Danis Jenkins or one of their other guards kind of dribble up the right wing, and he'll just kind of cross right around 35 feet from the rim, kind of right around the logo, extend it out at the top of the key, and they'll just pitch it to Cade, and Cade is just going to go screaming downhill. And he's just so damn big and strong that when he gets that head of steam, it's really difficult to deal with him there. But, for this team, and they've struggled to score in the half court for most of this season, but when they do succeed in the half court, it's usually because Cade Cunningham is able to get those deep paint touches. And again, this scoring in the paint is so vital to Detroit's offense. They're not a good three-point shooting team, right? They're mediocre in terms of shooting percentage and bad in terms of volume. So they've got to get as many of those deep paint touches as possible. And this is why having variety and many different ways to generate quality paint touches is the pathway to having consistent paint scoring. Because even if you have a guy like Cade, eventually a team can figure out how to really load up on him. Cade did not get as much dribble penetration when they got into the second half of this game, right? So that's why you got to have other avenues to get there. And this Detroit team just has so many avenues to get there, like defense to transition sequences. They forced 5 turnovers on Nikola Jokic, really swarming him, catching him with his back turned to the defense quite a bit. Jokic was a little out of rhythm coming back from his knee injury. He was just a little sloppy, but Detroit just did an awesome job of swarming him and forcing turnovers, getting out in transition off of those turnovers. They ended up scoring 20 points on the 10 Denver turnovers. So they basically scored every time Denver turned the basketball over. And it's because there's a dynamic with their athletes in the open floor that's different than it is in the half court. Take just Ron Holland, for example. Like, hey guys, sorry to interrupt. If you've made it this far, it would mean a lot to us if you would just hit that subscribe button really quick. Ron Holland in the open floor is kind of a devastating offensive player. He shoots 66% in the open floor in transition. He's going to get those big semi-transition drives when he gets to the basket or just streaking up his lane for layups and dunks. But you get him into the half court, he shoots 34% there, right? Completely different player. 24% from three. Although the funny thing, he had a couple of misses in this game from three that were so bad that they led to points. He banked in a three on the left wing. It was funny. I was listening to it on the Denver broadcast here in Denver, and the announcer's like, Ron Holland for three, that's off. And then it like banks in, and then they're both like, oh my God, because he just missed it so horribly that it went in. He had another one that he missed so bad that it like took a weird angle off the rim, and they got offensive rebound put back. So Ron Holland actually provided some utility in the half court as a shooter, ironically, in this game. But getting out in transition as much as possible unlocks athleticism opportunities, right? And there are a lot of really good athletes on this Detroit team that can succeed there. 28 more transition points for the Pistons last night. We talked about this in our power rankings video on Monday, but they had gone 4 straight games where they averaged just 21 transition points. They went 2-2 in those games. The last 3 games, they're averaging 35 points per game in transition. So really starting to get back out in the open floor. It was a huge part of this particular game. So we have the defensive to transition sequences. We have the Cade drives when you get into half court. The third piece of it, it really comes down to their front line and the guards as well in terms of the offensive rebounding, but everything underneath the basket that doesn't involve drives or transition pushes, which is like post positioning, interior passing, offensive rebounding, cutting, things like that, right? Like Jalen Duren and Tobias Harris just hitting a couple little hook shots in that second half for the Pistons. Like Jokic gets Jalen Duren on the right block. Duren just kind of bumps him with that left shoulder, gets to a little hook shot over the top, hits it. Tobias Harris gets Peyton Watson with a little chicken wing in the same spot, hits a little kind of floater on a step through move. Those threes that Duncan Robinson ended up hitting, like Duncan Robinson pours in 6 threes, scores 20 points. That ended up opening opportunities because we're going to talk about it on the Denver side in a little bit, but Denver did kind of a poor job tracking Duncan Robinson throughout the game, but Duncan hit some threes. And so there was a huge possession late in the game when Denver was making their comeback where Duncan comes off clean again at the top of the key. And so Jokic has no choice but to come way out to the level to contest. What does that cause? That opens up that lane for Jalen Duren to just go right down the middle. Nobody on that back line when Aaron Gordon is out of the lineup is remotely close to big enough to handle Jalen Duren unless they're in their 2 big looks with Jonas Valanciunas, which actually had some success last night. But Duren gets that roll into an offensive rebound because Duncan Robinson is pulling the big out to the level in that little off-ball action, right? Plenty of examples of nice interior passing, especially like the Nuggets run a lot of like strong side zone. It kind of looks like a matchup zone, but they'll bring like Jokic off of his man just to the strong side of the floor right outside the block, and he'll just kind of stand there and zone up. And so there are opportunities if you can kind of flash to the middle or along the baseline for easy little interior passes that can lead to baskets, but a lot of teams don't have the interior passing ability to capitalize on that. Detroit passes the ball very well on the inside. They get a lot of really good opportunities that way. And so you end up with 58 points in the paint, kind of par for the course for what is one of the very best paint offenses in the NBA, but it came in different kind of ways throughout the game. And that is the value of having many different ways to generate those deep paint touches. And then the Detroit jump shooting was super impressive all night long. Duncan Robinson, again, 6 threes, big shots from key guys in crunch time. We talked about the Tobias lucky bounce one in the left corner, but he nailed one in the fourth quarter off of the right wing, caught Julian Strawther slip in for a second, just kind of relocated up to the right wing. Quick little last second kick out pass that he knocked down. JaMychal Green hit a huge one in the same spot in a late clock situation. They badly outshot Denver off the catch in this game. So Denver takes 22 catch and shoots. Detroit takes 20. Detroit gets 30 points out of those 20 catch and shoots. Denver gets just 18 out of the 22 catch and shoots. That was one of the biggest differences in the game. And then several big defensive performances across the board for Detroit. I thought Jalen Duren held up super well in the Jokic matchup, just bringing the physicality, especially in the first half. Jokic's the best player in the world. He was going to figure some stuff out. He did in the second half. He was much better in the second half. But in that first half, when Detroit built the lead that carried them through to the finish line, Duren was doing really well on him, bringing that physicality. Jokic was really trying to flop and grift fouls on Duren. There were like 3 or 4 times where he either Duren would crash the offensive glass and Jokic would have inside position. And when Duren would bump him, he'd like fall over to try to get a whistle. Or there was one where he tried to like do that classic, like kind of low gather move on Duren right around the left elbow in the first half. No call, got his hands out of there quickly. Again, one of the big kind of giveaways for a defender actually starting to frustrate an offensive player is when he starts to lean more on grifting than actually just playing basketball. That's a credit to Jalen Duren. I just thought he did a really good job on Nikola Jokic. Gave him some one-on-one buckets as well. Had 4 offensive rebounds. Just monster game from Jalen Duren. I thought Asar Thompson did an amazing job on Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray got hot in the late fourth quarter and put a bunch of points up, but that's what he does. He's Jamal Murray. He was 4 for 13 in the first 3 quarters, and I think Asar Thompson deserves a lot of credit for that. Several other Detroit perimeter guys logged some good reps too. They just caused him to rush by getting up into him and being super physical, even when Jamal would break free. Like he'd break Asar off with a jab step or break free from him in a ball screen. But when he would get into that mid-range or get into his drives, he'd be a little panicky about the late pursuit coming in, and he would end up smoking a layup or missing a pretty tough mid-ranger. And that really is the dynamic you see a lot with the elite NBA defenses, and it's certainly a factor with Detroit. There is like this thing in the back of your head where you never feel like you're open, even when you're open, because of the pursuit. How many times in this game did we see like a transition push for Denver where it looked like one of their guys had a chance to get a layup, and then like Cade Cunningham would come in and swat it off the glass, or Ron Holland would come in and swat it off the glass? Like these big pursuit moments where it looks like an advantage, but an elite Detroit athlete is trailing the play and just gets up in the air and makes some crazy defensive play. That can start to lead to demons in your head, right? Because now you're scared even when you're open because you don't know what's happening behind you, right? Like the steals on Jokic every time he turned his back, they're swooping in from behind. Jokic had, especially in the first half, some misses right around the rim where like they're misses that Jokic doesn't usually miss. And a big part of that is there's just a lot of congestion around him. Even when he would like spin off of Duren, he would spin off of Duren and contend with somebody else at the rim, but there would be Duren again, chasing from behind, trying to contest from behind. And it just causes you to do funky stuff with your rhythm that can make you miss some shots that you normally make. And I just thought between Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren in particular, they just made life very difficult on Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic throughout the game. They put up their numbers. That's what they do. They went on a big late game run. That's what they do. But for one of the greatest offenses in this era of NBA history, you got to see the Detroit defense cause some real problems for them. Just a really great demonstration of what makes the Pistons a contender this season. I always put extra stock in these types of matchups. Those, I divide my contender tiers into 3 tiers. Those are your top tier contenders, teams that have a great chance to win it. Your second tier contenders, the teams that have a real chance to win it, but it's a small chance and they're just pretty flawed and some things got to go right. And then the third tier where it's like just straight up prayer time, right? Those top 2 tiers, though, they all have a real chance to win the title. And so when those teams match up with each other, I always put extra stock in it. Like, okay, your shit works, but does it work against the best teams in the league? And so we know what Detroit's bag is, so to speak, right? It's a mix of elite perimeter defense, interior physicality, and Cade Cunningham's greatness on the ball. All 3 of those things shined in this win. Their elite perimeter defense made life hell for Denver's guards. Their interior physicality played Jokic into a lot of turnovers and misses around the rim and did a lot of damage on the offensive glass. And Cade Cunningham was able to generate quality shots when they ended up in the half court because of his ability to beat the point of attack and get deep paint touches. All of those things worked in this matchup against a team that I have is literally the second best championship contender in the league. So just a really nice performance for the Detroit Pistons. On the Denver front, I just thought they were sloppy on several fronts in this game. And it's just really difficult to win a game on the road against this good of a team when you're this sloppy. Like, Jokic is obviously still working on getting his rhythm back after his injury. He obviously annihilated the Clippers, but he was pretty sloppy in the Oklahoma City game as well as this game. Those late doubles when he's got his back turned, like when Jokic is at his best, he just kind of has a perception of the floor that where he doesn't get caught off guard by that kind of thing. And he was getting caught off guard by it last night, and he was in the Oklahoma City game. It's one of those things where, when Jokic gets his rhythm, the speed of the game won't catch him off guard as much. You could even see it. There was a play late in the game in crunch time in this one where they went for that same swoop where Jokic is, standing around the elbow and he's got his back turned to the left sideline and the guy comes digging in for the steal, but he saw it coming that time and he pulls it out, whips it around, and I think it was a wide open corner three in the left corner. And so you could even see over the course of this particular game, Jokic start to kind of make the adjustment to the speed that Detroit was playing at defensively and start to make the reads. I talked about the grifting. That's just the kind of thing that I don't think Jokic is going to be doing when he's in full rhythm, and he was much better in that second half. As a team, the poor tracking of Duncan Robinson, you have to stay attached to shooters because if you get detached, meaning like a distance between you and them at any point, then they can run into their looks. When they run into their looks, they get into the footwork and the release that they practice thousands and thousands of times every week. So at that point, they're not even going to see the rear view contest or even the contest on the front side. You have to find a way with elite movement shooters to tangle up their feet somehow, to disrupt that footwork when they're in the gym alone by themselves practicing. And the only way to do that is to stay attached. And so many Nuggets had bad reps on Duncan Robinson. Peyton Watson had a bad rep on him at the top of the key where he got detached and Duncan just kind of wheeled around and ended up getting an easy offensive rebound putback. Jamal Murray had a brutally bad rep early in the game for Duncan's first shot. He got caught standing still at the right elbow extended, just not paying attention. Duncan just relocated to the right corner, hit his first shot. That's a great way to get a shooter in rhythm. Give him a super easy one early in the game. Julian Strawther had a bunch of those kinds of classic reps like I'm talking about where he just briefly gets disconnected from Duncan, does get back into the play and offer a rear view contest, but at that point, Duncan's already into his rhythm. He's going to knock that kind of shot down. Those are the kinds of mistakes that you just can't make in this kind of game, right? Like the Tobias Harris three, not the one where he got the lucky bounce off the left rim out of the left corner, but the other fourth quarter three that he hit on the right wing. Julian Strawther, paying attention, falls asleep for the last 2 seconds of the shot clock. Quick little relocation from Tobias, wide open three. Strawther in general, and I want to talk about Strawther in a good way here in a minute because I thought he showed a lot of offensive pop in this game and he's starting to gain some momentum there. But Julian Strawther, there were several plays too where the Detroit wings were crashing and he's just kind of bouncing around on the perimeter, not really scrapping for the ball. That's another big area of opportunity for him. That the attentiveness throughout the shot clock in his off-ball defensive responsibilities. And then secondly, you got to scrap. When the shot goes up, you got to scrap. You got to be in there fighting for the ball, and just didn't do enough of that last night. I talked about those transition pushes where Detroit got back in the play and made some big defensive plays. I thought those were also some poor decisions from Denver on the break where they probably should have pulled it out and just ran some offense because you could kind of see the whole thing developing the whole time. It didn't look like there was much of an opportunity. So, and then some of the offensive rebounds, lastly, I talked about Peyton Watson losing Duncan Robinson. Strawther had some plays where he was standing around. In general, against a team like Detroit, you've just got to be so locked in the scrap. They did a better job in the second half. They still ended up giving away 5 putbacks, but it was better than they did in the first half, I suppose. But just in general, if you're going to win that kind of game against that good of a team, you've got to bring a more clean effort in terms of your execution and mistake making. Some other quick takeaways for Denver. Julian Strawther's offense, that was his third time in the last 7 games where he went for at least 15 points. He didn't have a single 15-point game in the entire season before that. Some really nice transition pushes for layups, a floater down the lane here, catch and shoot 3 there. Just much needed buckets against a very good Detroit defense. Jalen Pickett's offense. He was 0 for 4 from 3, all on pretty good looks, and they almost seemed to miss by more and more as he was getting further into the game. That's just tough because of the way Detroit was guarding him. They were basically daring him to shoot. Pickett's a little out of rhythm right now. That's definitely not helping things. Getting Cam Johnson back will allow Jalen Pickett to be in a lower pressure role coming off the bench if he's even in the rotation at that point. Peyton Watson's attacking. Peyton had a weird game. He missed 3 or 4, especially in the first half, like easy shots, like where like floaters and layups where that just kind of bounced off of the rim and popped out, and just kind of unusual misses for him. But one of the things I was impressed about with Peyton Watson in this game was he never, even though the shots weren't falling, he never stopped attacking and made some huge defensive plays down the stretch, a couple of huge blocks in the fourth quarter run, and then was constantly putting his head down and attacking the rim, which is what rewarded him with a lot of free throws. I talk a lot about how your whistle actually comes down to who's being more physically aggressive, not less physically aggressive. And Peyton got to the line a lot because he was being physically aggressive on his drives. And then Jonas Valanciunas, I thought he was great in this game. The Jonas only groups did fantastic, and the Jonas and Jokic groups together did great. Just big and physical under the rim, helping them clean up the defensive glass, finishing on cuts. Some really good deep drop coverage reps where he got some blocked shots because he actually presents a little bit more length at the rim even than Jokic does. Overall with Denver, they just look a little out of rhythm with the return of Jokic, and they're a little sloppy right now. But these tough games against elite teams, they'll get your habits right quick. And they're going to have another opportunity tonight to get a big win on the road in New York against the Knicks. We'll see if they're able to get that job done. It's a tough one on the tail end of a back-to-back. I'm also curious to see if Jokic ends up playing in that one. We'll see. Today's show is brought to you by presenting sponsor Hard Rock Bet, Florida's sportsbook. We talk a lot of hoops on this podcast, but there's nothing like big game week. On Hard Rock Bet, Seattle is a 4.5-point favorite over New England. For games like this, basic bets just don't cut it. Hard Rock Bet is loaded with special props that you can't find the rest of the year. Scoregami, opening kickoff touchback, all of the off-the-wall bets that make every snap matter. These props only come around once a year, so you might as well have some fun. If you haven't signed up with Hard Rock Bet yet, there's never been a better time. New signups can double their winnings on their first 10 bets, a max of $50. That's right. If you would have won $100 on your bet, make that $200. Plus, you don't want to miss Hard Rock Bet's $7 million big game bonus party. Place a $10 big game parlay, and you'll get a share of $7 million in bonus bets, win or lose. Every parlay counts, and the more you place, the bigger your share. I already built mine. Now it's your turn. And if you're in Florida or New Jersey, the big game energy doesn't just live in the app. Head to a Hard Rock Casino for drawings, giveaways, and all the excitement leading up to kickoff. Download the Hard Rock Bet app and make your first deposit today. All right, before we get out of here today, let's talk a little bit about this James Harden-Darius Garland swap. It was made official literally right after we finished uploading our episode last night, as fate would have it. I still feel more or less about this trade the same way I did yesterday. I like it a lot for Cleveland. I see the opportunity for the Clippers, but I don't love it for them. Again, I believe in Garland when he's at his best, but he's got an extensive track record of not being able to hold up physically. So let's talk about this Darius Garland injury thing, because it's tricky. Because on the one hand, the example you're going to point to if you're a Clippers fan is Steph Curry, right? Steph has these really bad ankle issues earlier in his career, kind of makes him look like this injury-prone guy that can't be relied on. But then suddenly Steph gets a handle on his lower body injuries through a massive strengthening of his lower body, constantly wearing ankle braces, all that kind of stuff. So yes, in theory, if Darius Garland can get a handle on his lower body injuries and find a way to stay healthy, he could finally realize his potential, and the Clippers could end up paying very little in this deal for a guy who's a perennial future all-star, right? So that's the upside. But there are several key differences, 4 key differences between the Steph Curry situation and this Darius Garland situation. 1, Steph Curry is a much bigger player. He tends to get lumped in with the smaller guards, but he's a legit 6'3", and he's well built. He actually has pretty good size for that point guard position. 2, Steph had an elite basketball trait that was not associated with his athleticism. He's the greatest shooter of all time. Darius Garland's entire ability to impact basketball games is predicated on his speed. Darius is a good shooter. He's a career 39% from 3, but his jump shot is dependent on his ability to get separation because he's small. That's a big part of why Darius Garland, when he's banged up, doesn't shoot the ball super well. So for instance, he's a career 34% in the playoffs, where he's routinely been far below 100% in terms of where he's at with his body. Thirdly, the Steph injuries made him a discounted player, which directly assisted the Warriors in each of their first 3 championships. Like, What allows you in 2015 to pay Andrew Bogut, to pay Andre Iguodala, to pay Sean Livingston is the fact that Steph made $11 million, right? Steph making $12 million in 2017, in addition to the cap spike, is what allowed the Warriors to pay Kevin Durant. That's 2 more championships right there, right? Like, if Steph was on a max contract like Darius Garland is now, those 2015 Warriors, those 2017, 2018 Warriors, they don't have as much talent. Their margin for error gets smaller. Darius Garland, between this year and the next 2 years, is making $126 million. So it's incredibly important because of the other roster limitations that will come from having his salary for him to produce. And then lastly, Steph Curry is the 5th greatest basketball player of all time. So, like, generally speaking, I wouldn't use an all-time great, a once-in-a-generation type of player as an example for what you think is going to happen with your guy. To be clear, I'm not opposed to the idea of the Clippers moving on from the James Harden experience and looking towards their future. I'm just surprised they were like, Garland's the dude we're willing to pay a ton of money to over the next 3 seasons. But again, there is upside. I think a healthy Darius Garland is one of the best offensive engines in the NBA. So maybe it works out for Lawrence Frank, makes us all look stupid. I'm going to move to the Cavs now and talk a little bit about James Harden. When we circle back and look at Darius Garland's numbers, I'll also compare it to last year's numbers so you can see what the upside looks like. For the Cavs, James Harden, even at this age, even with his playoff shortcomings, is just a flat-out better basketball player than a banged-up Darius Garland. Let's get into the numbers a little bit and see what the Cavs are getting. So counting stats, we went over these yesterday, but just really quickly, 25, 5, and 8 on 60% true shooting. The scoring and efficiency is actually up considerably year over year from last year. His shooting, it's interesting. His jumper's been good in some spots and bad in others. He's been awesome off the catch. He's shooting 41% on catch and shoot threes this year, so he'll immediately be a legit off-ball spacing threat right away. Dribble and ISO threes, very situation dependent. So on face-up triple threat situations, 25 for 104, just 24%. Off the dribble, 33% overall, but 39% out of pick and roll. So when his guy gets wiped out on a screen and he could shoot a 3 in pick and roll, or if a guy goes under a screen, 39%. That's very good. His ISO threes, he's actually only shooting 27%. Now, that actually gets boosted a little bit by his ability to draw fouls. We'll talk about that in a minute. And he's been a very good ISO player overall. But in terms of when he actually gets an ISO step back 3 off without getting fouled, it's going in 27% of the time this year. 47% on floaters, 42% on mid-range 2s inside of 17 feet. He's been leaning on that a lot, especially in crunch time as of late. And then 53% at the rim. The play type data with James Harden is super strong. And this comes down to the combination of his passing ability, which is in that upper tier in the NBA, and his ability to get to the foul line. He's averaging 8.5 free throw attempts per game. That's the 7th most in the entire NBA. When James Harden takes a shot out of ISO, he draws a foul 22% of the time. That is a huge part of what drives him to 60% true shooting, despite the fact that he can be mediocre as an actual shot maker. And it's also a big part, in addition to the playmaking, to what drives his shot creation data. He's generating 1.04 points per possession, including passes in pick and roll, and 1.08 points per possession, including passes in ISO. When you're comfortably over a point per possession in half-court shot creation at that kind of volume, because James Harden's volume is off the charts, that to me is a really strong foundation for quality half-court offense. So that's going to help a lot. I think this is going to be super helpful for the Cavs because they've had a hard time scoring with Donovan Mitchell off the floor. They have a 120 offensive rating this season with Donovan Mitchell on, just a 112.4 with him off the floor. Now, part of that is Darius Garland having a rough season, but that's kind of the point, right? Like, you're turning Darius Garland into a guy who's been better at least this season, and depending on how you feel about his injury history, potentially in the big picture as well. Now, things will look different. They will play a different style. I expect the Cavs to shift a little bit more to a slower pace. We'll see. That's going to be the challenge for Kenny Atkinson, is getting them to continue to play fast when James Harden is off the floor, or on the floor, because again, that defense to transition is a huge part of what has made the Cavs better over the last year and a half with Kenny Atkinson, right? But it's going to shift a little bit in the half court. It's going to be a little bit more your turn, my turn, a little bit more spread pick and roll, right? But there's utility there because Donovan Mitchell and James Harden are both so good as catch and shoot 3-point shooters. When you're running your actions and you've got, Mobley coming up to set a screen or Jared Allen coming to set a screen, and it's James Harden on the opposite wing, just a dead-eye knockdown catch and shoot 3-point shooter, or vice versa, that's going to help. Again, I talked about this yesterday. It's going to be a little uglier. There's going to be games in the regular season where the Cavs lose and their offense looks stagnant. There's not a lot of ball movement. That's kind of going to be the nature of having a your turn, my turn style attack with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. But over the years, the Cavs offense has kind of degraded into that anyway when they get to the postseason, except for it's been Donovan Mitchell out there by himself trying to hero ball the team. Sorry to interrupt the video, guys. If you've made it this far, it would mean a lot if you would just take a second to hit that subscribe button. Having James Harden out there will give you a better ability to, one, have a second side creator for Donovan that makes his life easier, but two, a higher floor offensively when Donovan Mitchell is off the floor. Again, 120 offensive rating with him on this year, 112 with him off. Big area of opportunity for James Harden to step in and help. The defensive conversation here is actually really fascinating because, to be clear, Harden is not a good defender, mainly because of his issues off the ball, which we'll talk about in a second. But he is much, much less of a one-on-one matchup attacking target than Darius Garland has been. And it shows clearly in the numbers. According to Synergy, when James Harden has been attacked one-on-one this year in either ISOs or post-ups, on 112 reps, he's allowed just 78 points, 0.7 points per possession. That's outstanding. And the reason why is he's much bigger and stronger than Garland, so he can't get bullied. And he kind of gets activated mentally in a one-on-one. He's very focused. He doesn't want to be targeted. He slides his feet. He's active with his hands and gets strips and steals. He holds up pretty well one-on-one. Darius Garland is just too small, and he has been brutalized in one-on-ones this year. He's been attacked 77 times, leading to 95 points. That's 1.23 points per possession. So a massive difference in the weakness of the matchup attacking in that off-guard spot going from Darius Garland to James Harden. Where James Harden is at issue is off the ball. He loses shooters often. He can lose cutters, and he loses crashers, and sometimes in big moments too. He's just not a very attentive off-ball defender. That's just going to put a lot of pressure on the Evan Mobley, Jared Allen front court to clean up messes that James Harden creates by losing track of guys off the ball. Overall, I just really like the move for Cleveland. You're turning a theoretical basketball player in Darius Garland into something that is much more of a known commodity, even within the context of the playoffs, where James Harden has been obviously a historically poor playoff performer. Even then, James has this outstanding upside in the postseason in the games where he is the best version of himself. Darius Garland has just really struggled to flash his upside in the postseason much at all. And so any concerns you have about the postseason are equally prevalent when you're discussing Darius Garland. So you're turning a theoretical basketball player into a known commodity. And when you consider that Donovan Mitchell could be a free agent as soon as the summer of 2027, the last thing you want to do is break down and keep watching him ride solo in the playoffs because of those injuries and create a dynamic where Donovan Mitchell starts to look elsewhere. James Harden, good or bad, is at least going to be out there with Donovan Mitchell, and he has the ability to do a lot of the things that Darius Garland has failed to do when he gets to the postseason, because James Harden does flash upside in the postseason, even though he can also have these brutal late series kinds of moments. The thing is, at this phase in his career, off of a guy like Donovan Mitchell, if Donovan Mitchell can be that guy, it makes you less reliant on James Harden in those moments. Like, for all of the crap that James Harden catches, it's not like Joel Embiid was just carrying the team. Kawhi Leonard last year had an awesome game too, but was pretty bad in the other 6 games. If Donovan Mitchell can continue to be the reliably awesome playoff performer that he is, that gives you the ability to be able to withstand the 2 or 3 times each postseason where James Harden kind of no-shows a game. And he can also be really, really good in individual postseason games. So I just think it makes a lot of sense for Cleveland. Moving forward for Darius Garland, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through his data from this season, and then we'll talk about last year and talk about why that healthy version of Darius Garland is what could be the upside here. So counting stats aren't great this year. 18-7, 57% true shooting. Incredibly mediocre. Shooting, good off the catch when he's open. 44% on unguarded catch and shoot threes this year. Bad when he's contested, 23% this season. Not super uncommon for someone as short as he is. Even when you go back to last year when he was much healthier, pretty big difference between how well he shot the ball when he was open versus when he was contested. 35% on pull-up threes, just 26% on pull-up threes in pick and roll, but he's been very good in ISO and transition. He's 5 for 5 on ISO threes, 45% on transition pull-up threes. Got a great floater. He's made 51% on 32 makes this year. Decent mid-range shooter, 46% overall, and 56% at the rim, which is actually pretty solid for a guard as small as he is, and especially when you factor into that he's been pretty banged up. Play type data with Darius Garland this year has been bad. 0.98 points per possession in pick and roll, including passes, 0.88 in ISO. So in pretty decent volume, well below a point per possession. That's not good, right? But what you're hoping for if you're a Clippers fan is the healthy version of Darius Garland. When Darius Garland is at his 100% physical peak, he is so damn fast and so good at making reads, both to bigs on rolls and in dunker spot situations, as well as kickouts to shooters, that he is just a machine that generates good shots. And so there's a version of this with him finding Ivica Zubats for little short floaters and deep seals and things like that, lobs and kickouts to shooters, where this could all come together. You look at last year as the example. Shot the ball so much better from everywhere. 41% on catch and shoot threes because he was better on the guarded ones. I think he was like in the mid 30s on guarded ones. 39% on pull-up threes. 43% on pull-up threes in pick and roll. That's the shot he hasn't been able to hit this year. And 58% at the rim, which is kind of insane for a 6'1 guard. Also, way better play type data. Of all of the 13 players in the NBA last year that ran at least 1,000 pick and rolls, Darius Garland was the third most efficient, just behind Shea and Tyrese Halliburton at 1.12 points per possession. He was outstanding last season in the regular season. No way around it. That's your upside. That's what you're banking on. But that was far and away his most healthy regular season. It was the only time in his career he's played at least 70 games. Over the first 5 seasons of his career, he averaged just 61 games played. Then, in that season, he played 75 games. He broke down, missed a bunch of playoff games, and looked bad when he played. So again, there's a version of this that could work out. Darius could be a perennial all-star, and Lawrence Frank could look like a genius. But there's also a version of this where you pay him $85 million over the next 2 seasons, and he's never as good as late 30s James Harden. So it was just a surprising risk considering how well the Clippers have been playing this season. And when you factor in the fact that with the rise of Jordan Miller and Kobe Sanders and the young talent coming up on the roster, it felt like they had a window to maybe extend this over the next couple of seasons. So I was just surprised that this was the guy that they were willing to move him for. Again, if you have another guy that you have your eye on, by all means, let James Harden walk. Trade him for expiring salary. Be ready to make the next phase of Clippers basketball happen. But in this particular situation, given that Darius is tied up in this long-term deal, you're just taking a relatively big risk. Where if Darius ends up being the lesser banged up version of himself, all you've done is make the Clippers a worse basketball team over the next couple of years. If I was trying to be a Clippers apologist and defend this trade, I would say, hey, no matter how good you've been this year, your best case scenario is the 7 seed. If you win a road play-in game and you have to beat San Antonio on the road, Denver on the road, OKC on the road, it's an extreme long shot that they're going to win the title anyway. Why not bring in a younger theoretical player that has some potential to be a high upside guy? So why not take a swing on a Darius Garland guy? And it's a defensible position. I'm just personally kind of out on Darius Garland at this point. I think Darius Garland has to be literally 100% healthy for him to be a positive impact player in the league. Once he dips below that, his ability to break the defense declines, his ability to make shots decline, and then all of a sudden the fact that you can pick on him one-on-one and get damn near 1.25 points per possession attacking him one-on-one becomes a problem that's difficult to handle for your defense. And so it just requires such a perfect mix of circumstances for Darius Garland to be the guy that I really believe in. Like, he's legitimately a top 5 offensive engine in the league when he's 100% healthy, but it's just so rare and he's a small guard, and he's starting to enter into his late 20s. Generally speaking, that's when it's harder to stay healthy. So I just didn't love this being the type of move to move on from James Harden for the Clippers. But again, there is clear upside there, so let's not pretend like that upside doesn't exist. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us and supporting the show. We'll be back tomorrow, either with some trade reaction or some game reaction, depending on the chaos. If something crazy happens this afternoon, we'll be going again. You guys know how it goes in trade week. Whether I see you this afternoon or I see you tomorrow, I will see you guys then.